Hello, everyone. Hello. Good evening. I'm Robin Woods. For those of you who are not familiar with me, I am the founder of Wine and Mastermind, and I am back with our Power Talk discussions, y'all. We've had some time off from the Power Talk discussions. I actually started last week, and my goal is moving forward to have these at least um, once a week. So I am looking forward to these discussions. And what I'm doing here, I'm taking some time, some opportunities where I can speak with other power moms, other boss moms out here who are really just excelling in life, in business, inspiring me to do things that are well outside of my comfort zone. And just sharing their stories. Like, I really want to hear from other boss moms, and hopefully it'll be a way to inspire you guys to be able to elevate and just really become the best version of yourself. So that's what these power talks are all about. For those of you who are catching a replay, please let me know that you are here. I want to hear from you. I want you to share throughout this conversation, share the gems that maybe you have, that some of the gems that have resonated with you throughout this conversation. I want to hear about it. I want you to let me know, let us know what's resonating with you. And everyone else, as you join, welcome, good evening. I'm so glad that you are here. Tonight, we are speaking with the lovely, the fabulous Miss Jennifer Dove. Jennifer is the CEO and founder of Woman Found, and she is also the author of Ready for More. And so I actually met Jennifer. Jennifer, we met back in October, right?
Yeah, yeah,
During a conference,
yeah.
and it was just hearing Jennifer's story. There was just so much there where it resonated with me because I could relate, and I feel like it's just a lot of similarities in terms of like our experiences and just vibe, right? Like just the energy.
Yeah.
It's just just in conversation, we've had some great conversations since October. So I was really looking forward to having you on here today with me. So thank you, Jennifer. Thank you for joining. I know that the people who hear you speak, they're going to be empowered and they're going to be inspired. So thank you so much for taking the time to be here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Robin. I really appreciate it.
Yes, absolutely. So, Jennifer, let's start, if you don't mind, just giving us some background about yourself. Again, I shared with everyone so far about you're the founder and CEO of Women Found and about your book, but give us some more background about yourself.
Okay, well, yes, I am the author of the book Ready for More. I'm a woman's guide to becoming fearlessly authentic. So, what I do is I consider myself an authenticity coach, and I help high achieving women to clarify their values, to find their voice, and execute their vision so they can live a life of fulfillment and a life of joy because we all want to live that. Now, I have been married for 22 years.
Wow.
I have two children. I have two children. I have a 17-year-old daughter and I have an 11-year-old son. And for many, many years, I worked in the corporate world, climbing the corporate ladder. And I did all of those things while I was, I'm a Navy wife. My husband is retired in the Navy, but a military mom, military wife and mom of two. And so what I found, one of the reasons that I wrote the book and started the company is because I found that a lot of times with high achieving women, we climb the corporate ladder, we get to the top, we do all the things, and then we reach a point in our lives that we're like, you know what? What am I really doing? Is this even what I really want to do? I'm not even feeling this anymore. But then the shame comes in because we went to college, we spent all of that money, we did the right thing of what our parents expected us to do, what the world expected us to do, and now we're here. But deep down inside, we feel like we are not fulfilling the calling on our lives. And I felt that way. And I knew I had to change. And I knew there were other women that felt that way. So I have dedicated my life's work now to helping women figure out what are the next steps for themselves.
I love it. I love that so much. And I will tell you, because when you shared that story back in October, I remember I was like, she's talking to me.
Yeah.
was like, she is definitely talking to me. Like that was me for a very long time in a career that I held as well. Just as I continue to move up the corporate ladder and, take on these leadership positions, it was like everything on externally, people would be like, oh my gosh, you're just living a life. Like you're just doing your thing. Right. And then internally, I'm just like, but I am miserable. Like I
Yes.
this, and it was to the point where I remember getting so used to just putting on face, right? Like
Mhm.
we're conditioned, right, to just kind of put on face and show up, and it causes so much more heartache. It causes so many other factors internally with us, or even externally in our relationships and things of that nature. I know for me
Yes.
personally. Let's talk about that because I want to really hit on this point of authenticity. And because I have the expert clearly here with me. I have the expert. So I really want to pick your brain on this because this is, a lot of people talk about this. And I remember being in my corporate role, where, especially for people of color, just, really wanting the space, especially, in leadership positions, really wanting the space to be heard, to be seen, right? Like how do I really show up as my true authentic self, when I'm not the majority, when I'm the only black female leader in the organization, like when I'm the youngest black female leader in the organization, like what does that really look like, right? And so kind of tying that in also to in my book, which those of you have probably heard of it, but it's Boss Moms Move Differently. And in my book, what I talk about is setting boundaries. And so this month has been a series around like just setting healthy boundaries. And so last week I talked about people pleasing and ways that you can just basically set more healthier boundaries, in your life. And so this week I want to carry over into that. So I do want to hit on the whole people pleasing aspect of it, but specifically for authenticity, why is it so important that we become closer to our truer self? Like, why is that so important?
Well, one of the reasons it's important for just like you said, because when you weren't your authentic self, you found yourself feeling miserable, right?
Yep. Yep.
So really and truly, who wants to be miserable?
Exactly.
Because what happens is over the extended period of time, if you are day in and day out putting a mask on and you start to feel miserable, that spills out into your other relationships. So things start happening like you start to feel resentment towards your spouse because you're like, man, you know what? He is himself all the time. And I have to put on this mask for this role and for this, and I can't even be the real me. That a lot of times um creates a deeper issue within you when you are not being your real authentic self. It is important too because you teach people how to treat you, right?
That's right. That's
And when you are not being who you really are, you're creating a false sense of how people should treat you. So now you're in the workplace or you're in a social group or you're at church even, and people are acting a certain way towards you, but they're not acting that way towards the real you. They are acting that way towards the you that you are pretending to be. And when I say pretending to be, I don't mean that you purposely say, I'm not going to show them who I am, even though some women do that. I mean that we have created defense mechanisms because we feel in some way that we are not good enough to show up as our real selves because we might be judged, we might be rejected, we might be made to feel less than. So we don't show up as our true selves.
Yeah. Ooh. So let me tell you something. I could unpack all. It's so much there that you said, and I appreciate you really breaking it down, right? Because on the surface, you're like, oh, you're just miserable, right? Like, and some
Right.
people just hear, oh, well, why is it important to be authentic, right? Because we know it's just going to make you more miserable if you're not, right? But when you broke it down and you really got into the layers and gave some practical examples of what that looks like, that can be so true for so many people,
Yeah.
right? And let me just kind of, I want to circle back on a point that you made about resenting, right? Like you resent
Yeah. Yeah.
people. It hit me right here because I remember a point in time again being in that position, right, where I just felt like everybody else had the space to just be themselves and I had to show up as this person, right? Not realizing that I was creating that, right? Because
Yeah,
like you say, like we create kind of we make the definition of how people should treat us, right? Like we define that. It's all us. It's not really everybody else. It's really us. So we're choosing to do that. And I say the same thing even with creating boundaries, because a lot of times I tell people, I say, you can't create boundaries if you don't really know who you are. How do you really
that's
create
right.
boundaries? How do you
That's
draw
right.
the line in the sand
That's right.
if you don't really even know who you truly are? So yeah, you're setting boundaries, but are those boundaries really in alignment to your truest self?
And that, that's the thing. That's the thing that I teach my clients, and I talk about in my book. What authenticity is a buzzword that people use, but what does it really mean? See, when you're not being your authentic self, it is because you are out of alignment.
Mm,
And you are out of alignment with three things: with your values, with your voice, and with your vision. And you cannot, like you were saying, you cannot create boundaries if you do not clarify what you value.
yeah.
Because when you clarify what you value, that's when you can draw the line in the sand. If I know that one of my true values is honesty, when you lie to me, you're done, because
Mm,
that's my boundary,
that's
right?
a boundary.
I value honesty.
Yeah.
And how do we know what we value? Our actions determine what we value. I can't say I value honesty if I lie all the time. I
Mm,
can say I value that, but my actions are not demonstrative of that being my value.
ooh.
So it's just authenticity is about being in alignment with your values, your voice, and your vision.
I'm curious. I want to get your thoughts on this, because I that's an interesting point that you made, and I love that point around like the honesty, right? Like you're a person of, a lot of times you hear people say I'm a person of integrity, right? A person of
Yeah.
honesty, right? Like you hear that, right?
Yeah.
Um, but what do you think about, because I know for me, there was a point in time where I would, how certain people like who just they lie, right? Like
Mhm.
they may have not been telling you the honest truth, right? But then there's a certain part of you that wants to give them grace.
Yeah.
Like where does that line, where should that line be drawn? Like, I guess in your opinion, is it more of one of those things where it's like, you know, I'm just completely drawing a line? Like if I find out that you're one of those type of people who you lie to me, I'm completely just cutting it off? Or is there some level of grace that you would recommend? Let's say if you're working with a client.
Well, I think, we're human, so we
Mhm.
all need to provide each other with grace. I think that is necessary. But for me, I can tell you what it is for me. If I find that I am compromising myself, if I am compromising what I say I value to deal with you, to work with you, that's a deal breaker, right?
Yeah.
Because if you want to be out of alignment with yourself, that's on you.
Yep.
But when I have to start compromising who I am, right? So now you're lying, so you want me to lie for you to help you cover up your lie. No.
Yeah.
Now I'm compromising who I am. Yes, I can give you grace because we all have periods in our lives where we are discovering and rediscovering ourselves, and we need time to implement change.
Yeah.
But if you have me doing things that I don't normally like to do or I feel bad about, then for me, that's a no.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree. And see, that's kind of where I am now. Like I'm like you say, it's like giving people grace, right? Because people are human, and things show up, right? Like I think for me sometimes the way I look at it is, if I see there's a pattern, if I notice
Mhm.
that it's more of a pattern that's happening, and that's when I'm like, okay, that's it for me. That's a line that I have to draw. I'm curious to know from you, like, was there ever a time where, let's say, maybe you had to pay a price for your authenticity? Let's say as a leader, let's say in a leadership position, or either you, or even maybe one of your clients. Maybe you know you had to show up authentically, right? And that came with a cost. Maybe the cost came with maybe something that wasn't as favorable. I'm not gonna say job loss or anything, but like, is there anything that maybe comes to mind that you can think of? And
So,
I'll share. Let me. Can I just say this? The reason why I share this is because, again, working with a lot of high achieving women, right? Some of us, as you move up, kind of to the point that you made about like if you're doing something that you know is just uncomfortable for you, something that you don't really value, like you know where to draw the line. Um, and some women, as they move up, right, in certain positions, sometimes it may come, sometimes putting your foot down, right? Sometimes saying no, sometimes setting those boundaries or drawing a line in the sand can come with a price. And I'm curious to know if that's been something you've ever encountered or any story you mind sharing.
so I will say yes, that has happened to me more than one time. I will
Okay.
share a particular story. As I shared, my husband is retired Navy, and we spent 3 years in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, Honolulu.
Wow.
And during my time there, just from happenstance and all of this, I ended up being the director of the child care subsidy program for the state of Hawaii. And as a Black woman in an area that there are not a lot of Black people, the Black population in Hawaii is 4%. So, I am not from Hawaii. I am not a Pacific Islander. I am military. And when I got the position, it was very difficult for me to make things happen because people did not trust me. Okay,
Hmm.
because it was a cultural difference. It
Yeah.
really was a cultural difference. People didn't really trust me, and so I suggested things, even though I had the experience, I had the knowledge, the skill, and the ability, but I had to fight my way through and prove myself. And so I had to pull back and implement change in small increments to prove myself, to let people know that I do know what I was talking about. And it took probably a year.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I stayed with it, and not only that, but I understood my environment. So I understood they just weren't being that way just because they were being mean and hateful. They
Right.
had never had experience with a Black woman before. And I think one of the things we have to remember in corporate, um, that's true as well. And
Yes.
what I found in Hawaii, it was hilarious because after I had been there some time, my administrative assistant, she said, all we really knew about Black women was the Real Housewives of Atlanta.
See. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we thought you were going to be mean and, I was like, wow. So I look at that, it was an opportunity to show the people there how Black women can be professional and run a program and get results.
Yes.
So sometimes we think things are challenges, but we have to look at them as opportunities.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And I can just add to that because from personal experience, one thing that's helped me navigate those waters, especially when you're kind of like the only, or people just trying to figure you out, right, has been building relationships.
Yes, yes.
building re- like people, a lot of times if you come in with that wall up, right, like you come in with the wall up instantly, which is expected, right, like I think it would be a natural response to probably come in a little hesitant, but really taking some time to connect with people in
Mhm.
that organization and in those different environments and groups, sometimes it's helped to just really open up doors for me in so many ways, and like you say, it's helped to change the perception because they're like, oh, this was a perception. They base it off of TV, off of certain people maybe they're
Yep.
following on social media, or all these types of things, all these narratives that they may have had from other people. So yeah, I agree wholeheartedly to that. What are your thoughts around, because and now this is something I used to hear all the time, like, I'm gonna keep it 100, right? Like, what's the difference? Jennifer, help me, help us, okay? What is the difference between keeping it 100, one
Mhm,
thousand, right? People
mhm.
say, I'm gonna keep it 100. That's how I'm gonna
Mhm.
show up at work. That's how,
Yeah.
nobody, right? What is the difference between that and being authentic?
Um So there's a lot I can say about that, but
Okay.
one of the first thing I will say is this. One of the things that I have always taught my daughter, because my daughter, she'll just speak whatever as it's but it's the truth. Do you know what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you
She'll
mean. My
just speak
son is
what
like that.
and so one of the things that I've raised my children to understand is that just because something is true doesn't mean that you need to say it.
Mm,
So when you say you're keeping it 100, yes, there may be things that you see or issues that are going wrong or people that are acting a certain way, and keeping it 100 and calling everybody out every time you see that, even though they may be wrong, even though the situation may be crazy, is not always necessary. One, it creates a barrier for you. So now you're dividing yourself amongst people. And the other thing you need to think about, is this issue really going to matter? Is it I always think about this before I speak on something. Is it going to matter in 5 minutes? Is it going to matter in 5 hours? Is it going to matter in 5 days? Is
right.
it going to matter in 5 weeks? If it's not going to matter in 5 minutes, hours, or days, I usually don't speak on it.
Mm.
And so, because a lot of times you create more of a problem by keeping it 100,
Yes.
right? Because
Yes.
now you're known as the angry black woman or the woman with the attitude, or she always got something to say. You can show up as yourself, but you don't have to speak on everything. And this is one of the things as black women that we are taught. Speak your mind. Don't let anybody tell you what you can and cannot say.
Mhm.
Yeah, that may be true, but that gets us in trouble a lot. It gets us in trouble in our personal relationships. It
Yeah.
gets us in trouble at our jobs, right? I had to learn that lesson with my husband. I would, yeah, and I talk about that in my book. I would get upset because the trash day was Tuesday, and I wanted him to take the trash to the curb on Monday night. And I would every week go crazy. Why are you not taking the trash out? I mean, everybody else in the neighborhood has their trash can out. Now, we never missed a trash pickup day. He
Yeah.
just preferred to take the trash out early Tuesday morning.
In the morning. Yes.
But it bothered me so much. And I felt like, and then my girlfriends were backing me up. Yeah, you need to say something. I can't believe he's doing that. You should say something. But did it really matter?
Wow.
It was causing issues in my relationship when
Yes.
I could just keep my mouth shut because I knew he was going to take it out on Tuesday morning anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so true. That's so funny that you said it, because I could think of a number of stories when it relates to my husband, where I'm like,
Yeah.
why did I even open my mouth? Like, it
Yes.
wasn't even necessary. Like, and so I believe that it does, especially as leaders, right? Like, what one thing that I know that I look for a lot of times is, do you have the leadership to be able to use good judgment, right? Like,
Yes.
you have the leadership to be able to use good judgment.
Discernment.
Yes,
Discernment is
right.
key.
Exactly. It is. And to me, it's like, oftentimes it's not what you say, it's how you say it.
Oh,
That's
yes.
the way I see. And I remember so many times I would be coaching, leader. I even people that I coach now, but I would say even when I was working in my HR role, like working with certain leaders, and it was like, I'm not telling you not to use your voice, right? Like, I want you to use your voice. I want you to speak up. I want you to be heard. But oftentimes it's how it's delivered, right? It's the delivery and the how. And that goes with everything else, right? When you have relationships, when you have friendships, when you have, when you're in a marriage. And so oftentimes I would say, it has nothing to do with you just, being black. We don't want to quiet you down in the workplace. We want you to say something. We want you to speak up. But it's how you say it and the timing, right? Like, who you're saying it to. Because to me, it's like, you want it to be productive if you're saying it, right? Like, I wanted you got to know who are the key players that you need to have this conversation with. Talking about it to a colleague, right? is
Right.
how productive is that going to be for you, or a group of colleagues? Like, it's not really productive if you're not talking to the decision makers, right? And so I say that all the time, because I know for myself historically, and I would say, to your point, like, even in, like, I want you to know the true me, right? Like and in my mind, I think I had it confused a lot of times around I had it confused between keeping it 100 versus being authentic and just communicating that in the right way, right? So yeah, I love that. I love that. So Jennifer, I want you to just share with me, especially this is kind of going back to, you know, leadership. I would say just leadership, just in general. What are some steps that you would recommend for, let's say, someone who is just struggling? Maybe they're in a role, or maybe potential leader, right? Maybe they're in a role, maybe it's not even in their job, maybe it's in their business.
Mhm.
Um, and they're struggling to identify their truest self, right? Because, and I say this all the time because I work with moms. And here's the thing, what I realized and what I discovered on my whole self-discovery journey is that we're always going through different changes in our life, right? Like, and so who we were just 5 years ago, I know I'm not the same person just 5 years ago. Our bodies go through so many different types of changes. The people who were around, just all kind of things just change, right? And so I find it necessary now more than ever to constantly, reinvent yourself, right? Like I find that is necessary to constantly reinvent yourself. And I know a lot of times we want to stay true. A lot of people say they want to stay true, stay close to their truest self. But over time you change, right? So what are some steps that you would just give for someone, maybe let's say they're just trying to figure it out. They're trying to identify, who am I today? Who is the woman that I am today? How am I showing up? And how can I show up more authentically? What would be some of those steps?
I really think, I've said this previously tonight, but I really think one, you have to know what you value. And to get deeper into that, you have to really look at what your limiting beliefs are. So I talk about this a lot. A lot of times we were taught things as children, speaking of women, taught things as girls that we believed that were true because our parents taught them, or a teacher, or our grandparents, and they were looking out for our best interests. One of the examples that I use all the time is that the limiting belief that my grandmother used to say all the time, that children should be seen and not heard.
Yep.
That's a limiting belief. Is that true? What does that teach a child?
Yep.
When you say children should be seen and not heard. So a lot of times we have to reevaluate what we were taught, and are those things really true in this day and age? I was raised that I absolutely had to wear tights or pantyhose to church. No way could I go to church without those on. Well, now I know that's a limiting belief.
Yep.
I don't have to wear pantyhose to church.
Exactly.
Right? So really think, and the next thing is recognizing your voice. You talked about voice. We are inundated, Robin, with so much stuff. That whole Real Housewives thing, that whole reality TV thing, Instagram, TikTok, the news. We have so many things that are telling us how we should behave as women and what we should do, that we emulate that, and we don't recognize our own voice. Our voice is tainted by so many other people's voices on Instagram, on TV, all of those things. So we don't even know who we are anymore. I don't know. Have you ever found yourself? I used to love reality TV, love and hip hop, Real Housewives, but I would find myself sometimes in a situation acting like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? That's not even who I am.
Yep. Yep.
But you have to recognize your own voice. And also you have to know what your vision is. What is it that you want to do? Not what did your mom tell you that you should do? Not what your girlfriend said. Not sometimes not even what your spouse or partner said. What is your vision for yourself? And that is scary when your vision no longer aligns with what you've been doing for the past 10 years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That is really scary.
It is.
But if you want to make changes, if you want to be your authentic self, you have to do the work to be in alignment. You got to have your values. You have to know your values. You have to know your own voice. Who is in your ear? You have to recognize this is not even me. I
Yeah.
don't even know why I'm thinking like this.
Yeah.
And you have to keep your vision in forefront. If you're running a business and you know what you want to accomplish, and you know the type of person that you want to serve, you have to keep that in the forefront, even when it gets difficult, even when it gets hard, even when the naysayers come, even when people challenge you, even when you challenge yourself. You have to keep that vision in front of you.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious, what would be some, you know, for someone who's not necessarily living authentically?
Mm.
Because sometimes it takes people being aware, right? Like actually having.
You have to have self-awareness now. You have to know.
Right. And
Mhm.
so how do you build that awareness to know, like, because I love your framework where you talked about like voice, right? Like especially when you talk about, we got all these different external sources that are like in our ear, in our faces, like all the time, right?
Mhm.
Like, but like for someone who is not really sure whether or not they're living authentically or not, because some people just confused. Let's just face it, because you've been inundated with all kind of things, in front of you. Like,
Right.
so what would you suggest they do? Like, if maybe they're not sure if what they're really doing is them walking authentically, in their business, in their relationships, in their jobs.
Um, I think a couple things you need to ask yourself. Number one, are you happy?
Mm.
And when I say happy, I don't mean jumping up and down. Hoo, hoo, hoo. I mean, are you happy? Yes, this may be challenging. This may be hard work, but I'm doing something that I really want to do. And do you experience a sense of peace?
Mm.
See, when you are miserable for a reason. We have our own indicators as to what's going on with us. We just don't pay attention.
Yeah.
Are the people around us who are closest to us saying, "What's going on? You seem a little upset today. You don't seem like yourself." Well, all of these indicators are things that say to us, "You know what? Maybe I need to figure out what's going on with me because I'm not at peace. I'm not happy." And so, you and I both talked about this. Um, I talk about this in great detail in my book. People would say to me, "Oh my gosh, you're the vice president of a major organization. Oh, you have these two kids, you have a wonderful marriage, you have all of the." I was miserable. Okay, it was all a front. It was all a front.
Yep.
I hated my job. My marriage was hanging on by a thread. I was not showing up like I should as a mom. But on the outside, it looked good. But I knew I needed to change because I was miserable. And I talk about it in my book. I was so miserable that it affected me physically. And I ended up in the ICU, not knowing if I was going to live or die. Okay. So
Wow.
this is what I'm saying. If you do not pay attention to those small hints, it will affect your body. I was so miserable that I got physically ill.
Wow.
And I
Wow.
was like, I have to make a change.
Mm. Yeah, because it starts mentally, right? Like
Yes.
it starts mentally. You have the mental for a lot of, I'm not going to say in every case, right? But a
Right.
lot of times it is mental. You have the stress, you're dealing with the
Oh,
stress.
I was stressed. Do you know what it is to pretend that you're happy at work for 8 hours
Ooh, that's
and go get
exhausting.
in your car and just be like, "You know what?" Or get in your car on your lunch break and be like, I can't even function." Do you know what it is to tell people how great things are in your relationship? And when you drive home, you sitting in the garage because you don't even want to get out the car and go in the house.
Come on
I
now.
mean,
I know.
yeah,
I know. I
yes.
know. See, that's real. That
Yeah,
that
it is. And a lot of times we don't want to talk about it.
nope, nope. I remember, and I'm going to share this because I share this, and my husband, he always kind of looked to me, and part of that, he's proud of me right now because, again, me being in a miserable position, right? Like, you faking the funk for 8 hours, 8 hours out your day, and by the time you get home, well, for me, by the time I was nothing to, I wasn't anything to anybody, right? Like, I just wasn't, and hopefully, can you hear me? I hope I'm not breaking up. Okay, I wasn't anything
I
to
hear
anybody.
you.
And it got to the point where, okay, perfect. And it got to the point where I literally I was so tired, so exhausted, and so burnt out, to the point where sometimes I would be in the tub. I would go home, greet the kids, talk with everybody, and I would go straight to the tub, and I would have my husband. I'm like, can you just bring me dinner to the tub? Like, I was just that miserable where I was like, I'm eating just to eat, right? But let me get in this tub because this is the most comfort I probably have found throughout my day, right? Because all throughout the day I'm just doing something that I didn't even like, working with people I didn't even, care to work with.
Yep.
So, I get it. That's a real thing. That's a real thing. And I think, again, looking at that from a standpoint of like authenticity, right? Understanding, kind of paying attention to those triggers, right? Those signs around you when it relates to our body, right? Our minds and
Yep.
what's giving us peace. And I would say that word you just said, peace, is a huge indicator for me. Like, I've just learned, and I remember growing up because I was raised in a church background, right? And so I remember, people always preaching about peace, God will give you perfect peace and all this stuff, right? And I just remember, I'm like, I never really understood what peace was
Yeah.
until I found it.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this is what peace really means. And so it's like, peace when you found it.
That's
So
true.
anybody who's asking, like, what is that peace? You know it when you found it. And peace is going to be completely opposite of being miserable, right?
It
Like,
is.
of anxiety, of depression. Like, it's going to be completely opposite. So when you found it, you know it. But if you're not in a place of peace, that's an indicator that something has got to change.
That's
Something
right.
has got to change. So I agree wholeheartedly. And I tie that back into kind of, setting healthy boundaries, right? So what are some things, and Jennifer, I want you to just share, what are some ways, and I think you kind of covered some of that throughout our conversation, but what are some ways that you would recommend? I would say you could hit on personally and professionally, maybe some ways that we could look to we could start implementing more healthy boundaries personally and professionally. What are some things maybe we need to pay more attention to?
So this is something that I think a lot of people don't like to hear.
Ooh, hold on, let me brace myself. You coaching to me now. You coaching. Come on, give it to us, Jennifer.
Everything that bothers you doesn't need to be addressed unless it is a deal breaker, unless it is a major boundary for you. Because what happens is if you address everything that bothers you will be known as the complainer, as the nagger. And then what is the end result? Because if you are complaining or just bringing up something just for the sake, what's the resolution? You're not going to be taken as seriously. So you address those things that are your boundaries with a plan to say, how are we going to fix this? We need a resolution to this. I'm not just venting. This is a deal breaker for me. This is crossing a boundary. So now we need to work on a solution to resolve this. If you're not going to work on a solution to resolve it, you're just nagging.
Whew. All right, everybody, we're gonna go ahead and close it out. You just that you just need to drop the mic on that. That's the realest of the realest thing right there, right? Like, I mean, just really being able to identify, like, it has to be the deal breaker, right? And
Yeah.
if it's not a deal breaker, well, number one, what I gather from that is it has to be the deal breaker, and you also have to come with some type of solution. Like, let's work to clarify what is the solution here, right? And if
Right.
it's not, you just complaining, you just nagging, you
You are.
complaining, you just finding a reason to argue.
You just want to vent. You just want to vent. And so you just want, a lot of times people say, well, I just want to be heard. Okay, so now you've been heard. Now what?
Mhm.
So when next week, when you go in the office and the same thing happens, now what? You're going to start to feel that resentment because you're going to say, "I told them this was a deal breaker for me, or this was a problem," but because you did not say this is a deal breaker for me, and we need to come up with a resolution so this does not happen again. If
Yeah.
you don't say that, and you're just venting. Now, when it happens the next week, now what?
Yes.
Now
Yes.
what?
Yes. Yeah. So you gotta you gotta speak on it. You just have to. It's just one of those things. And it kind of goes back to what I talked about last week. We were talking about people pleasing. And we were talking about how it shows up in so many different aspects of our life, right? Like from, personally, professionally, a lot of times, with friends, right? When you have old friendships, people you've known for years, and you have your new friendships that maybe something that you're trying to establish. I'm curious to know for you, like, what are some ways when it comes to, I would even say down to just friendships. Let's just talk about friendships, right? Because sometimes that's a hard sometimes it could be a fine line, because a lot of us, and I know a lot of people who, number one, sometimes we want to keep the peace, right? Either we want to keep the peace, we don't want any confusion. We don't want to deal with it. And then some of us, maybe we just have a hard time with, let's say, we've had friends for a certain period of time that we've known for years, and maybe now I've gone through, I've gone through my coaching with Jennifer. I've realized who I am, right, authentically. I've gone through I put in the work. I know who I am. And I still got these friends, which I call environment. So a lot of the wine and mastermind people, they're familiar with me referring to this as your environment, right? So your environment can be your friends, your family,
Right,
people who are around you, right?
right.
And now I'm having a hard time with kind of setting boundaries around, like, who I am versus where people are trying to keep me, right? Like, so you may have like family and friends, certain community where, certain people in your community where maybe they want you to stay who you were, 20 years ago.
Right.
And you want to continue to have those relationships, right? Like, you value those relationships, you love those people, but maybe you're just struggling to, because I, from personal experience, you have some people to be like, girl, you change. Who are you? Who you think you are? People start throwing the shade, right? Like, let's just call it what it is. People throwing shade when you become a different person. So my question is, how do you overcome that? Like, what would be your advice for someone who may be challenged with just trying to, they want to keep the relationship, right? In terms of, staying connected to those people, but at the same time, you know, um, you become a different person. And so now there are certain boundaries in place, certain things that you no longer do, or maybe certain things you no longer entertain. How do you have those discussions? How do you have those uncomfortable discussions?
Well, the first thing I tell my clients about that is, one, understand that when the people around you who are your friends or family, when they say things like, "Oh, you changed," or "You acting brand new," please understand, one, don't take that personally. It has nothing to do with you. See, you are a mirror for that person, and you are showing them what they have not done.
Mm.
And so
Woo! Woo-hoo!
they are feeling convicted themselves about, okay, how was Robin able to change? Before, what connected us, we had something that connected us, that we were the same. And now I see that growth and that change in Robin, but I don't see that growth and change in myself. This is our reflection now is not the same. And so I don't know. I might not even be able to use words to articulate what I'm feeling. All
Yeah.
I can say is, "Oh, you brand new now." But what it is an expression of fear that you are leaving me behind, that I am not growing at the same pace or level that you are. So what I tell my clients is, understand it's not about you. See, most people aren't thinking about you. They're thinking about themselves.
You better say that. Oh, that's so good.
Oh, and another thing is, a lot of times too, you just have to tell your people, your family, your friends what the boundary is, right?
Mhm.
If my aunt is constantly saying to me, "Oh, you getting fat, girl, you have get," no. my weight is not up for discussion. I don't want to hear another word about it.
There you go. There you go.
That's done.
Yep. Yep. And it goes back to what you just said about knowing, identifying what those deal breakers are,
Yeah.
right? Like understanding, like, okay, I'll joke with you, we'll laugh, we'll joke, but you know where the boundary is. Like, but you got to get crystal clear about what that boundary is, so that you can. And I think it's so funny that you say that, Jennifer, because can you see me? I just want to
Yeah.
make sure you can still hear me.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, okay. But I think it's so funny that you say that because again, looking back, and I can remember in my 20s, right, growing in my career, because again, I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what boundaries to set, and so I would allow certain things to be said, certain things to be done, and instead of me addressing it because I didn't know, I didn't realize it was a boundary, right? I just knew I just didn't like it, and I would hold it in. I wouldn't say anything, and then I would just have this outburst of later it would just build up, and then that's when you start to clapping the hands and clapping back and
Keeping
everything.
it 100.
So we keep trying to keep it 100 with you, right? And then the other person is looking like, well, I didn't realize this is an issue. Like we always talk like this, right? And so I think that is something so important. And again, a lot of grown people, they don't want. A lot of people don't want to admit that that is an issue, but it is. And I say that because I've seen it among hundreds, and I can say hundreds because I've worked with hundreds of people, grown folks, adults,
Yeah.
some grandparents. Okay, like I've seen it where we get caught up. Number one, we don't know our boundaries. We don't know who we are, right? And then number two, we get in the process of people pleasing, trying to make everybody happy, right? And then now we have no boundaries. Now we're miserable. Now we're unhappy.
I am someone who I am a reformed people pleaser, okay?
Like,
I was
listen,
a huge people pleaser, and a lot of people don't want to hear what I have to say about people pleasing because people don't look at it this way and because it stings. But because I was such a people pleaser, I will tell you, people pleasing is something you should stay away from because people pleasing is a form of manipulation. When you are a people pleaser, you are a manipulator. And this is what I mean by that. You know what you need to do for that person to get them to do what you want them to do.
come on now.
So you manipulate the situation by pleasing them.
Yep.
It is a form of manipulation. A lot of people don't look at it that way. They say, oh, well, I just don't want her to be mad at me. No, you are getting some benefit out of this situation as
Mhm.
well. So you know what to say to that person, what to do for that person to make them act the way you want them to act. It is a form of manipulation because you don't want to deal with somebody not behaving in a manner that makes you feel comfortable.
Yep. Yep. You said that so well. I literally, I was preaching, and I'm saying preaching because I was just talking about this last week about, I agree, it is a form of manipulation. I do. I believe you're trying to anticipate, right, the response of
Yeah.
someone else. You're trying to control the response and the reaction of other people. And like you say, because of the fact that I was a repeat offender,
Oh, yeah.
of people pleasing, I
Yes.
know all too well. I know it. And when I find myself, even now, because it was something that was just so, I mean, this was years of doing that, right? And so even now I have to catch myself being in the process
Yes.
of, like you have to
Yes.
be aware of this stuff. I have to catch myself being in the process of like, wait a minute, no. If I just can't do it, I just can't do it, right? I love you, but I'm not, it's not my business if you're upset about that. That's not really my business. I'll give you a soft answer. I'm all about soft answers. I'm all about giving you a loving answer if I need to. I don't have to apologize, but I can at least communicate what is true to me. And if that's just true to me, that's just true to me. So,
That's very, that is very true. And one of the things too that we have to unlearn is that
mhm,
in most instances, we don't owe people an explanation.
mhm.
I
No.
said, someone said, "Can you do such and such?" The answer is no. I
Mhm.
can't. I do not. Now, I'm not saying if it's not if it's your child or something like that, but I'm just talking about if someone says, "Can you attend such and such event? We really want you there." If you can't or you don't want to, you can just say no.
Yep. Yep.
Period.
And I'm gonna tell you, Jennifer. Now, so my stance when it comes to children, because I talked about this, where even people pleasing shows up even when it comes to your kids, right? Like,
Absolutely.
and I do believe that, because sometimes, you know, and some of it is for good reason, right? Like, because I'm clearly guilty. Like, and I'm saying good reason why. In that moment, I felt like it was a good reason, right? Like your child showing out somewhere, and you just like, okay, let me calm them down. Let me give them whatever they want, right? Like, so I can calm them down in a public setting, right? Like, to me, that was what worked for me in that moment. But there are other times when, and I say this because I catch myself, and I have to, because I'm preaching it, I got to make sure that I'm doing this as well. When it comes to us taking care of ourselves, right? The self care. There have been times where I remember, like, if I went to, like, go get my nails and toes done because I've been working for so long. The moment, if my daughter came in and said, "Mommy, can I go to the nail salon with you?" I didn't want to tell her no, right? Like, I didn't
Right.
want, but I knew I needed that moment.
Right.
I knew that I needed that moment to myself. And there were so many times I'd be like, yeah, yeah, come on, let's just go ahead and go. And my husband would be looking at me like, you are tired. You need some time to yourself. Why are you, you know it's going to be additional work, right? Now, I've learned to balance that out a little bit more, where I know that I'm going to have my days when I go, right? Where I can say no, you and I, we're not going to go today, but we're going to plan something in the future. We're going to plan a mommy daughter day for both of us to go out, right? Because now what I know about myself is that if I'm not at a place where I can have that time to myself, that quiet time, or that time to just unplug, it's not going to be a very exciting experience, right? Like, the kids, they can sense that kind of stuff, right?
Well,
Like, you're already frustrated, and you're tired, and you're trying to tag them along.
yeah.
They pick up on it. So it's like, it's doing more harm than good of just saying, yes, come along with me, versus telling them, hey, not today, maybe another day we can do
And
it.
I think, I have a son and a daughter. And from a parenting perspective, it's a little bit different because you are their teacher. And so
Yes.
I think when you want to go get your nails done and your daughter wants to go, and you know that you need the time to yourself, it is an opportunity to teach your daughter as a child to prioritize herself and
Yes.
her well-being, and tell her the truth, and tell her this has nothing to do with how mommy feels about you. I love you and I
Yes.
want to spend time with you. But one of the things that I want you to understand is that we all need time to ourselves. We all need time to relax. And I need that time right now. We will have mommy daughter time, because what this does is it helps us to raise young women who are not 35 when they are learning the lessons that we learn.
Amen.
Yeah.
Listen, all of this, all everything you just said is spot on. And it's so funny. Like, I'm just lighting up. You see me lighting up so much, because this is exactly what I'm talking about in my book. It's all
Yeah.
about, what are we modeling for our children, and everything that we're doing, the decisions that we're making, even down to interacting with our kids, right? They're watching us. And so, how we're showing up, the decisions that we're making, when we're people pleasing, when we're giving in every single time, you're sick,
Whew.
you know you're sick, and you know you need to relax and lay down and have some time. And if you always say, okay, well, instead of saying, hey, I love you, I'm gonna lay down for the next hour. Let me rest. Mommy's not feeling well right now, and then we get up. If I feel better, we'll do whatever. You start playing. You exhausted. Your child sitting there. They're watching you. Exhausted. And I say this because I was guilty of it. I was guilty of it for the longest time. And once it feels so uncomfortable at first, right? It feels uncomfortable to even say that, because that's not what we're
Because you have a limiting belief
limiting belief.
that as a mom, that's not what you're supposed to do.
Exactly, because you feel like, it's like all the mom guilt starts coming up, right? Like, you start feeling like, well, maybe I'm being selfish, right? And I always tell people, it's the difference between selfish and self-care. There
Right?
is a difference. And when I began to get to a place where I could actually set those boundaries, even in my house, even with my kids, when I tell you, Jennifer, I show up so much better. I
Yeah.
show up, I'm able to show up as a much better person for my kids, for my husband, for the people around me, because I'm learning, right? I've learned to set those boundaries. I've learned to communicate my needs. So yeah, yeah. I just love it. I love this. And I know we could probably go on.
Yes,
Right?
yes.
This is so good.
We'll have to do a part two.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do a part two. Like I absolutely love all of this. And I think we're gonna go ahead and wrap it up. But before we wrap it up, Jennifer, I want you to share if you have any particular coaching program
Yeah.
or or even where people could find you. Please just share it. Let everybody know.
So you can find me on Instagram, Jennifer J Dove. I always tell people about the J because I shared this at the conference. My father did not have any boys. And so the J represents my maiden name, which is Jeffrey. So I try to honor that because he had girls. He didn't have any boys. Jennifer
Gotcha.
J Dove on Instagram. You can also go to my website, www.jenniferjdove.com. Facebook is Jennifer Jeffries Dove, and you can find me there. And I do have a coaching program. It's a 6-week coaching program called Align to Elevate. Like I said earlier, where I help high achieving women clarify their values, the things I've talked about tonight, clarify their values, recognize their voice, and execute their vision so they can live a life of joy and fulfillment.
I love it. I love that so much. So y'all, please go check Jennifer out, and definitely check out her book, Ready for More. I
Yes.
think it's a wonderful book. And it's actually behind her. So for those of you,
Yes, it's my book cover behind me. Yes, Ready for More.
I love that. I love it so much. So yeah, definitely show your support. And if you want to get in contact with Jennifer, please hit her up on the social media platforms. And for those of you, if you are interested in learning more about my book, Boss Moms Move Differently, you can visit bmmdbook.com. This is a book to help high achieving moms redefine motherhood, reprioritize their well-being, and reinvent their life. So Jennifer, it has been a pleasure. It has been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today. Like I've had so much fun, and we got to do a part two. So
yes, we do.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and end it, and I hope everybody has a fantastic night. Thank you, Jennifer.
Bye.